Okay, moving on from the short lip, the next level the dog will show is the offensive pucker. So this is a C-shaped lip. You can really see it well in the dog on the right, where the lip is all pushed forward. You're starting to see teeth. This C-shaped mouth in general indicates a dog who is willing to come forward and interact in an aggressive or offensive way with whatever they are threatening. So most people can read this type of threat. So our goal with clients is to teach them to see the early signs of stress so that the dog doesn't actually have to turn up the volume like this. So both of these dogs are willing to bite you. I just want to point out the difference between the C-shaped pucker on the left, where the mouth is kind of pushed forward. That's Sarah again threatening the puppy in my office, who she didn't want to approach very effectively. The puppy listened. And the dog on the right is a dog who was tethered outside of a shelter where I was doing some work, and they have come with the catch pole to take him off the tether. And you can see that his mouth is V-shaped. That's called a gape. And both of these dogs these are threat behaviors, obviously. They're showing their teeth. The one on the right is more motivated by fear, though. It'll just help you figure out how to work with the dogs when they're showing these types of body language. Another thing I always keep a close eye on is whether the dog is breathing. I really like dogs who have their mouths open, and here's Duncan starting off with his mouth open, just out on a warm day, panting, and he suddenly noticed something off to the right, and he closed his mouth and focused his ears in on that. So really pay attention to dogs who are panting, 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 and then stop. That's a really important piece of subtle body language that a lot of clients miss. And you need to look at the rest of the face. You can't just look at, well, he's breathing, so that's good. Again, we've got to look at more than just the word. We're going to look at the sentence and the paragraph. So looking at these two dogs, the facial tension will tell you a lot. They are both breathing. The one on the left has the almond-shaped eyes, the ears back, his tongue has lost control of itself, it's kind of lolling at the side of his mouth. It's a very relaxed dog, just rolling on his back after a run. Whereas the dog on the right, he's panting, but very different expression, right? He's got a lot of facial tension, a lot of wrinkles on his head, his eyes are very round, his ears are more forward, and that's a dog who's at the veterinarian's, and he's stress panting, so he's breathing. But stress panting is a whole different thing. So again, we got to look at the whole paragraph. So when the dogs are really stressed, either from heat or from psychological stress, they will expand their tongue into kind of this spoon shape. And both of these dogs, these are two brothers, and they are both experiencing stress, but you can see the one on the left has the ears back, the squinty eyes. It's a hot day and he's just trying to cool off. Poor dogs can't sweat. The dog on the right is, again, his brother Wickham at the vet, and he is stress panting. There's not quite as much stress in his face, but his ears are back. You can see the facial tension, and if you could see the dog in motion, it would be kind of a fast, nervous pant. And I've seen the video this came from, and he was shaking at the same time. So really obvious when you see them in motion. There's a little bit of stress panting from my old mini Aussie. This was when he was in the depths of doggy dementia. He had a little bit of cognitive dysfunction, and this is kind of how he spent his evenings. You can see the stress in his face. There's a lip lick, and he would just stress pant all evening and yawn. So he's just a very confused old dog, and he would spend hours pacing and panting at night. It's a really hard thing to watch. I'm sure some of you have been through this. A couple of other things to pay attention to with very stressed dogs. You might see hypersalivation. You can see the strings of drool hanging from Aleli's mouth. They're actually coming right off the screen in that picture. She's worried because I'm on the wrong side of the fence. She's a very sensitive girl. And sometimes dogs will sweat through their paw pads, and you will see sweaty paw prints if you have the right type of footing in your training area. This does not show up everywhere. Obviously, you won't see it on grass, but if a dog walks in and it's not raining out and you see sweaty paw prints, that's a stressed dog usually. So there's been a lot of talk of calming signals. This is something that we really need to teach clients. These are things that people don't, well, we have our own stress signals, but dogs have different ones. So on the left you see a tongue flick, on the right you see a yawn. I actually don't like the term calming signals anymore. It was all the rage when the book first came out in the 90s, but we can't really tell if a dog is deliberately trying to calm themselves, another dog, or us without getting into their brain. So a more scientifically accurate term would be a stress signal, a displacement signal, or a cutoff signal, because they definitely do make these gestures to try to cut off aggression or try to stop an interaction. I'll show you some video of that. So the lip flicks, the tongue flicks, if you guys do your homework in slow motion, you will see these really clearly. Dogs do all kinds of funny things with their tongues. It's hard to catch in regular speed until you've watched it in slow-mo. So on the left, you've got the whole lip lick. The dog is licking her whole nose with her cute spotty tongue. And on the right, it's just a little tongue flick, a little in and out. And you'll see those in the videos later on. This is one that a lot of people don't catch, the look away, the deliberate head turn. And once you know to watch for this, you will see your dogs doing this all the time. This is Maggie's dog, who is deliberately turning her head away from another dog who's approaching her that she's concerned about. And you can see the ears back, the whale eye, the tense mouth, lots of facial tension here. This is not just a dog who happens to be looking over her left shoulder. She's deliberately looking away. This is what it looks like in motion. Rude dog comes up. I'd rather you didn't. There's a yawn and a look away. And you will see this all the time with dogs once you know to look for it. Another displacement signal that dogs sometimes do is sniffing. You've got to look at it in context. This dog is just sniffing because she is out on a walk. She has not been on a lot of walks in her life, and she's out in the forest preserve having a great time on her long line sniffing all the animal smells. That's totally normal sniffing, but if you ask your dog to do an agility jump and she suddenly goes and finds something very interesting over her right shoulder and has to go sniff it, the dog may be a little stressed by what you're asking them to do. So here's that same dog having a slightly tense interaction with another intact female here. There's a nice paw raise, and oh look, I'm going to sniff instead. So the other dog is going to join her in sniffing. And this is a way that dogs can sort of cut off potential aggression, just like, let's go over here and sniff this interesting thing. And that was a really nice job she did of defusing a potentially tense situation. You can also get the shake-offs. Sometimes dogs will groom themselves. We do this ourselves. I don't know if you've ever been to a job interview where you're just fiddling with your hair or fixing your clothes. We do grooming behaviors all the time out of stress, and dogs do as well, except a little more graphic. Here's Theodore cleaning himself. So look at it in context. If it's just evening and they're settling down to sleep and they do a bit of grooming, that's one thing. But if they're grooming out of context, it's often because of stress. And those of you in the Fedzi Academy know about show fleas. Sometimes the dogs will just be really itchy when you ask them to do something, and that's just stress. So. And the shake-off, it looks very much like a dog coming in out of the rain. They'll often do that after a tense situation. So the dog on the bottom left is attempting to get my Doberman to play with her, I think for one of the first times, and you'll see her shake off the tension after that. Here we go. Oh, that was hard. Let me go back to the pit bull. He's my best friend. Zoomies, sometimes a zoomie is just a zoomie, but sometimes if it's out of context, again, if you've asked the dog to do something, if tension seems to be building, and then there's a bunch of zoomies, that might just be the dog dissipating stress, getting rid of some anxiety. If you've just let your puppy out of the crate and they've been crated all day and they do zoomies, that might just be energy. So again, all of this is context specific. So here's a video of Aleli meeting yet another one of my Dobermans. This is Farah, the really friendly older one. And Farah's offering a whole bunch of play bows. Look at the difference in the elbows in these two dogs. One is doing many, many, many elbow bends, and Aleli's just not sure about this new dog. So she gets rid of some of her stress by doing some zoomies. And Farah was also a very vocal player, so she's play growling here. Lely's just you can see she's concerned. She's hiding behind this chair a bit, and then, okay, we're going to do some zoomies. Just get rid of some of that stress. They did end up being really good friends. But the Doberman's a little pushy. Here's another sign of nerves. Again, this tooth chattering can happen sometimes with intact dogs. Sometimes it can be a sexual thing, but in this case, it's feeding time, and Maggie is a little bit nervous, and she does some very dramatic tooth chattering when she's nervous. She used to do this in the car.
Maggie, you chattering your teeth. Maggie. Maggie me. Wanna go outside? Wanna go outside?
So she doesn't do that in the car anymore. She's getting less nervous, but that one was just excitement because it's breakfast time. So here's a video with a lot of displacement signals. A little bit of the story I'll give you behind these 4 dogs. Pay no attention to the mini Aussie in the back. He's got dementia. He's not really with it. The dog on the left is sometimes dog aggressive. She has sent both of the smaller dogs in this video to the vet for repairs at various times, and the Doberman on the right is a foster dog, and he is oblivious to the fact that the dog on the left is a little bit worried. So look at the 2 yellow dogs here and just count up the displacement signals. I'll narrate along.
Kenya.
So lip lick. Lick. Half yawn. Lick lick. Full yawn. And the Lely's very conscious of all this. Many more yawns. Just see how tense she is having these dogs play so close to her. Just going to check her out. More lip licking, yawn, and a bit of a look away. There, shake off all that tension. Just a note, Lely is wearing some Mardi Gras beads in this video. It is not a prong collar. I get asked about that sometimes. She's never worn a prong collar. Can't get that dog to stop healing. So we'll move on into the top 5 misreads that I see with clients, and this could be a top 10 list. Again, I could talk about body language for a week, but a few things that you will find people misunderstanding, and it may be worth pointing them out and talking them through it when they see it. A lot of people think that dogs yawn because they're bored. I've discussed that. I'm not going to go into great detail on that again. A lot of people, when they're looking at body language, they only look at the tail, and I've spent a lot of time on the bitey end of the dog showing you all of the little subtle things that you need to watch for. Wagging means arousal and willingness to interact, and that can be in a good way or a not so good way. So look at the rest of the dog and take it in context. Freezing is something we have a hard time understanding. It's a piece of dog body language that we don't do as humans. There's been some cool research on the guilty look. I think we can really improve a lot of dogs' lives by getting rid of the notion that they feel guilt. And I'll go into a little bit about what is a tap out. So we've gone through yawning. I'm not going to belabor this anymore. Dogs generally yawn because they're stressed, not because they're bored. You can almost hear the squeak in that yawn. He's really got his mouth open. I'm asking him to pose beside a lot of bigger dogs. That's my little poodle. Many years ago. So we're looking at the tails. We're not just looking at wagging versus not wagging. We're going to look at the tail position to get a barometer on how the dog is feeling about the world. So the more fearful or worried dogs will have the tail tucked. Again, if that's a whippet, that might be a normal whippet. Then look at whether it's low. Neutral is usually at about spine level. Look at the base of the tail if you're checking out a pug or a Doberman or a dog without a normal tail. And then the high tails at the right. That could be an excited or aroused or a dog who's willing to interact in a not so positive way. So when we're looking at, first we look at the position, and then we look at the wag, we look at the speed and the height and the amplitude, how far it goes from one side to the other. So in general, the wags with the dog's body loose and wiggly and the spine curves. Sometimes they kind of lose control of their oscillator and it goes in a figure 8 or around in circles. I kind of like those. Those are generally more affiliative friendly wags. The tail is usually lower depending on conformation. So here's Rugby. He's my poster child for loose and wiggly. That dog was made of jello. So here's a nice low soft wag. It's not going a whole lot from side to side, but it's low and the body is loose and wiggly, and clearly this is a dog who is interested in interacting in an affiliative friendly way. Now what about this girl? A little different tail, right? She's got the tail stiff and above her body, and she's about to bust into play. I took this picture. I know what happens after this, and if you look at her face, if you look at the almond-shaped eyes and the ears back and rotated, she is about to respond to this young male dog's play bow and start playing with him. So here's a really different tail. If the tail is high and just kind of vibrating a little bit from side to side, that is often a more offensive posture. Again, you gotta know what's normal for the dog. Some dogs just don't have tails that can move a whole lot. But if you look at this dog, her tail almost stops when it's vibrating. She's also got her hackles up. And this was one of the first times we used a stuffed dog to assess a dog for dog aggression.
Yeah. Hang up to what?
She's bloody. Try to get it to move, but don't hurt yourself. Don't get hurt.
No, I'll grab this.
So it's a willingness to interact, and it's not necessarily a positive willingness to interact. I will note that there's been some studies done on the stuffed dogs as an assessment tool, and it is pretty predictive in fighting dog populations, but you get a lot of false positives for aggression when you use these with pet dogs. So don't use this to test shelter dogs or pet dogs for aggression. So here's another dog who is wagging, and she's willing to interact. Tell me if it's a positive way or negative way. So she's wagging. So sometimes the back end says one thing and the front end says another thing. So really, we need to get people to stop looking so hard at whether the dog is wagging or not. I'm sure some of you have been bitten by wagging dogs. Another super important thing to teach people is about the freeze. This is so often not so much misinterpreted, but just not seen, because this is not a human threat signal. This is a canine threat signal. If you've got more than one dog, and you've got one dog chewing on a bone, and dog number 2 walks up, and dog number 1 just stops chewing, your dogs see that. They're like, oh, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't know you were chewing on a bone. Let me get out of your face. But a child in the same situation, people just do not read this. And I would wager many of these dogs suddenly and out of the blue bite somebody. I would bet if we had closed circuit video, you would see some of these precursors to aggression, and you would probably see a freeze. We just don't read it. And some dogs give a really short freeze. The 2 videos I have, actually I've got 3 videos, and the freezes are pretty short in all of them. Most dogs are a little more polite than these guys, but I'm doing something stupid to this guy. Watch what I do.
Can I take that?
So he gave me a really nice freeze. He said, no, you may not take that, and I kept messing with him with my fake hand, which is also why I don't use fake hands anymore. So watch this little dog with the green collar. She's going to give a really nice freeze to the humpy male who keeps putting his paws on her before she gives him a pretty effective correction.
Oh yeah.
You want this one now? She did a freeze, she did a snarl, and he wasn't getting it, kind of like I wasn't getting it with the fake hand, and so she had to escalate and snap. And this is what dogs need to do with us, because we are really, as a species, not very good at reading their language. So they need to turn up the volume on us. And part of our job as trainers is to help these dogs and be their translators so they don't have to do this. An important sign of arousal is piloerections, the fancy word. The dog might put their hackles up. You've seen hackles in a few of the videos I've shown. This doesn't always mean aggression. This is Kenya. Her hackles went up every time she saw a creature who was alive, whether it was a squirrel, another dog, everything but humans. She would hackle. And she definitely did have a high prey drive, and she did have some issues with other dogs from time to time. So it's definitely worth watching, but it doesn't mean 100% of the time when you see hackles, the dog's going to bite somebody. No. But watch it. And the other thing you'll notice with Kenya is she's got a little tiny piece of hackle that sticks up in the middle of her tail. So watch this. You see the little tiny shark fin hackle in her tail? So she's just watching squirrels. An excitement whine. She had pretty impressive hackles. Like me to open the door and let her do some murdering. So here's another really often misunderstood signal. Amy Cook and I are on a mission to get people to stop rubbing dogs' bellies. Because a lot of people would rub this dog's belly. He is rolled over, but his ears are back, his eyes are round, his face is tense, he's licking his lips, he's doing everything possible to say, please go away. Sarah Kalnice calls this the tap out. You might want to look at her video, The Language of Dogs. She has a DVD that describes this in more detail, and he is not asking for a belly rub. And sometimes when people say, oh, suddenly and out of the blue the dog bit, this is what the dog is doing right before. And we go in with our grabby little hands and try to rub their bellies. So other things you can look at, the dog on the left is, he's probably also not asking for belly rubs. I think we like belly rubs more than dogs do. We like giving them to dogs more than dogs like getting them from us. But you can see his spine is curved, his mouth is open, his body is floppy. He's just playing upside down with his toy, whereas the dog on the right, everything about her is tense and frozen. The tail is almost tucked. She's doing a nice look away. Everything about this dog is saying, please don't pet me. And yet, if we don't know about this, we will. This is a really important thing to talk to clients about. So here's another one in live motion, so you can see everything the dog's doing. Look away, lip lick. I'm not sure the human realizes that she is asking him to stop. She's got her tail tucked. Everything about her is saying, please stop.